What is a commission of inquiry, and why was CSW pushing for one for Eritrea?
Sure. A commission of inquiry is possibly the most serious and significant mechanism that the UN's Human Rights Council can establish with respect to a grave and systematic human rights situation. We're talking about situations here that are really at the extreme, situations that are both gross and systematic over time, and where you have a government or authority that is really doing very little to address the situation on the ground. So when we talk about a commission of inquiry, we're really talking about something very significant, very noticeable in terms of the international human rights system and mechanisms, and with respect to a pretty grave situation on the ground. With respect to Eritrea, we recently helped, along with a number of other partners, to seek to establish a commission of inquiry on Eritrea. For those who know about the situation in Eritrea, it certainly fits all of the categories that we would talk about when we think about a commission of inquiry. The situation on the ground has been pretty desperate for a number of years. There are an estimated 2,000 plus Christians in indefinite detention, sometimes incommunicado, in some of the toughest, roughest conditions. There are an estimated 3,000 people who are fleeing the country on a monthly basis. Most of those because of the human rights situation in Eritrea, many of them escaping the enforced and indefinite conscription into the military. For most Eritreans, their daily life is without hope for the future. Young Eritreans, there's no university in the country, so young Eritreans don't have educational hope. There are a range of very serious sort of base indicators in terms of the human rights situation. There's no freedom of the press, no freedom of religion or belief, no freedom of political activity. So the situation is really very severe. Add to that is the intransigence of the Eritrean government. So at an international level, we've tried to address this in the past. The Eritrean government has largely refused to ignore the recommendations that have been made to it via its Universal Periodic Review. There has been an appointment of a special rapporteur in Eritrea for over 2 years now. Her recommendations have been ignored by the government. And so now this is the next step, and quite a significant step at that. Thirdly is the issue of the voice of the Eritrean people themselves. In seeking a commission of inquiry, we're wanting to raise the voices of Eritreans, and a commission of inquiry will certainly do that. We've seen that in the recent work of the Commission of Inquiry on North Korea, and in its reporting. The voices of many North Koreans were heard, and their plight and their tragedies were heard for all of the international community to hear, and we're certainly hoping that will be the same for Eritrea. And finally, in seeking a commission of inquiry, we hope that, in fact we know that the documentation that will come out of it will be of an international standard such that should there ever be any future criminal investigation into the situation in Eritrea, there will be well documented information and evidence at the disposal of any criminal investigation. So regardless of whether we see international justice with respect to Eritrea in the short to mid-term, there will be evidence set aside so that justice will come for this country at some stage in the future.
What difference will a commission of inquiry make for the people of Eritrea?
In the short term, as I said, it'll allow hopefully many Eritreans in the diaspora outside of the country. It's highly unlikely that the commission of inquiry, once appointed, will have access within the country itself, but for many Eritreans in the diaspora, it'll allow for them to have their story told and their story heard. at an international level. This will be documented. There will be, I'm sure, opportunities for both public and private hearings, depending on the security protocol of those who decide to give evidence. So there will be an opportunity for their voices to be heard. In the longer term, we hope that there will be some sort of international justice process which will allow not just their voices to be heard, but for some sort of process which will enable justice to come as a result of the violations that they've experienced.
So what are the next steps?
Sure. Over the coming couple of months, leading up to the September session of the Human Rights Council, we'll see a shortlisting of potential candidates for that three-person panel for the Commission of Inquiry. One of those we already know will be the current UN Special Rapporteur on the situation of human rights in Eritrea, Sheila Keith-Ruth. The other two have yet to be appointed, and we'll see a shortlisting process and then an appointment at the September session of the Human Rights Council. And then there'll be a period of a year within which the Commission will conduct its investigations. We hope that we'll be able to aid the Commission in its work, both in providing documented information and evidence that we've historically collected through our research and through the interviews that we've carried out, and also helping to assist the Commission in meeting Eritreans themselves, speaking to Eritreans and finding out the situation on the ground directly from them firsthand. So we'll be hoping to assist in that process.